to identify all these characteristics. In the case of thermal scanner, where we are using a thermal range of 3 to 14 micrometers, uh, it, it's a special kind of across-track multispectral scanner and senses the energy in the thermal range of the electromagnetic radiation, which is 3 to 14, and basically 5 to 8 is an absorption band, significant atmospheric absorption happening in 3 to 5. So 5 to 8. So 3 to 5 and 8 to 14 are the usable areas of thermal remote sensing, and these thermal bands are using the characteristics of 3 to 5 and 8 to 14 micrometer ranges. As you can see in the figure, this up to 3 to 5 we will have atmospheric windows, and 8 to 14 we will have another atmospheric window. All other are atmospheric absorption areas where we may not be able to get penetration of the electromagnetic radiation in the thermal segment. So in thermal scanners are some satellites named Advanced Spaceborne Thermal Emission and Reflection Radiometer, which is known as ASTER, in the Tara satellite, as we have told earlier, Tara and Aqua satellites. Well, the Tara satellite has got ASTER, the thermal scanner, and it's capable of creating a lot of thermal images of the globe, and even we have got three-dimensional or the digital elevation models generated out of the ASTER data. And in the case of TIMS, that is the Troposphere Infrared Mapping Spectrometer. TIMS is the by NASA is capable of sensing in the various 6 wavelengths, which is shown here from 8 to 12 or 13, or sorry, 8 from the 8 region to 13th regions. It maps all the spectral bands, and you can see in the figure here that especially in the airport area, you can see a lot of that runway can be seen and wavy, which is because of the heat above heat air above the runways, causing it to be in a wavy runway characteristics is given by the heated air above the runways. And it's a daytime image of the San Francisco region, recorded in 8.5 to 13 micrometer thermal wavelength region. So the thermal scanners help us to identify, especially from ASTER and these TIMS, as we told, as we explained, that it's a troposphere infrared mapping spectrometer, helps us to identify objects in the day and night, and it has got a capability to, since we are not identifying the reflection, we are identifying thermal emissions of the object. We can map, or we can utilize this for the daytime and nighttime imaging. Both time, since it has got its own emissions, body the Earth objects has got its own emissions, absorbing the heat from the electromagnetic radiation. So its own emission can be mapped both in the day and in the night. But in the case of visible spectrum, with reflected area, we can only do the mapping in the daytime. So let us see some of the principles of the thermal scanning, where it's basically measures the radiant energy from the surface, and it's measured by the thermal sensors, as we have told earlier. A lot of thermal sensors we are keeping at various bandwidths in the thermal area, and this radiant energy of the objects. Radiated will be sensed by these sensors. This thermal emission is the portion of the internal energy of the surface that is transformed into radiation energy. And we used to measure the radiant excitance, or the radiant excitance. It's typed as M, is given by the Stefan Boltzmann. And he has brought out a law called for black body and for real material, that radiant excitance M is equal to sigma T raised to 4, where sigma is a Stefan Boltzmann's constant, which is a constant derived by him, and T is the temperature of the black body. And for a real material, it is this radiant excitance M equals emissivity into Stefan Boltzmann's constant into T raised to 4, where emissivity of the material, epsilon is the emissivity of the material, and the Stefan Boltzmann's constant into temperature of the black body raised to 4. So if the black body, in the case of a black body is the hypothetical ideal radiator that totally absorbs and totally emits all the energy that is received on it. It completely absorbs all the energy received, and it's a hypothetical body, and completely re-emits all the energy received incident upon. So for the case of black body, radiant excitance is Stefan Boltzmann's constant into temperature of the black body. In the case of a real material, we need to have the emissivity of the material also, along with the black body case. So we need to identify, we can measure the radiant excitance M from the thermal image. We know the Stefan Boltzmann's constant, and if you are able to identify the emissivity of the object, then the temperature of the object at a particular instant can be identified. So we need to identify the emissivity from this formula. By this principle of radiant excitance by Stefan Boltzmann, we can identify the thermal characteristic of an object at a particular instance of sensing by the thermal images, from the thermal images. So thermal sensors record radiant energy M from the surface. If the emissivity is known, T can be calculated. So emissivity can be considered as the radiant excitance of any object at a given temperature. Emissivity is the radiant excitance of a given object at any temperature by radiant excitance of a black body at the same temperature. So radiant excitance of any object at a given temperature by radiant excitance of a black body at the same temperature is the emissivity of an object. And if that is known for the object, we can identify the temperature from the thermal images. So for an ideal black body, emissivity is 1. Ideal black body, emissivity is 1, and emissivity of real objects will range between 0 and 1. Real surfaces. So the emissivity varies with the wavelength. For surface selective radiators, emissivity varies with wavelength. For in the case of gray bodies, materials which has a constant emissivity less than 1 in the different wavelengths. So gray bodies will have constant emissivity which is less than 1 in any of the wavelengths, in all the wavelengths. So we can utilize that gray body concept to identify the emissivity and identify the temperature of the object. And there is a brightness temperature concept. If we don't know the emissivity of the object, we can utilize the brightness temperature concept. Brightness temperature of an object is defined as the temperature of a black body at which the radiant excitance recorded from it is equal to that of the target object. Brightness temperature of an object can be considered as the temperature of a black body at a particular temperature. Temperature of a black body at which the radiant excitance recorded from it is equal to that the target object. It's a situation where the radiant excitance of a black body and the target object will be similar at a particular temperature. Then it's called the brightness temperature. Radiant excitance of a black body at a particular temperature will be the same as the radiant excitance of a target object. If it becomes same, then it's called the brightness temperature. In thermal imaging, the radiant energy M from the target surface is measured. We measure M, the radiant excitance, and if the emissivity is known, the surface temperature of the object can be identified, obtained using the Stefan-Boltzmann's law. If the emissivity is unknown, the brightness temperature of the surface is determined. So, if we'll be with the knowledge of emissivity, we will be able to identify the temperature from thermal images of temperature of the object from thermal images. And if you don't know the emissivity, we can use the brightness temperature characteristic, and brightness temperature can be identified to fix the temperature of the object. Sensors used in thermal scanning. Basically, quantum or photon detectors containing electrical charge carriers are used in the case of thermal scanning, and basically there are three types of sensitive sensors of this particular range of thermal scanning is used. That mercury doped germanium, which has got a sensitivity from 3 to 14 micrometer. The entire range of thermal region, this mercury doped germanium is sensitive. And indium antimonide is sensitive to 3 to 5 micrometer range, and it has got a smaller range of 3 to 5 micrometer, that indium antimonide. And mercury cadmium telluride is sensitive to 8 to 14 micrometer range. So 3 to 5, 8 to 14, and that is the sensing area of thermal region where we have got atmospheric windows, and we have got sensors, indium antimonide and mercury cadmium telluride, which can sense these, or we can use mercury doped germanium to identify the entire range of 3 to 14 micrometer. And you can see here the lens, detector, electronics and image that generated out of it in the figure. And let us see how we can interpret a thermal image. And a thermal image is basically known as a thermogram. And it's a pictorial representation of the detector's response on a line-by-line basis, how the detectors responded to the radiations or thermal emissions from the objects on a line-by-line basis. And information can be extracted based on the knowledge of the daytime or nighttime image, and information about the temperature extremes, heating and cooling rates are used to interpret the type and condition of the object. The heating and cooling rate of the object, we need to know some basic concepts of the objects, its heating rate and cooling rate. For example, the maximum temperature, attaining of maximum temperature of rocks and soils are faster than water. So on a daytime, terrain temperatures will be higher, and water cools down slowly, so water will have more temperature in the night. So it depends on the day and night. We need to identify these cooling characteristics, heating and cooling characteristics of the objects, and we need to know the time of sensing to interpret the thermal images. And its applications can be in various fields. A lot of applications are there. Some of the examples can be in the geological studies determining the rock type and structures. Type of rocks, different rocks will be emitting different temperatures. There are temperature differences because depending upon its components, its characteristics, its position, its structures, that means fold, fault. All these things will keep the temperature differences. The emission characteristics will be different in the fault zones, in the fold zones, and the type of rock. Different rocks will have different emission characteristics. And in the case of soil also, it is similar. It depends upon the moisture content, it depends upon the clay content, it depends upon the soil texture and all these things will cause the thermal emission, different thermal emissions, which help us to identify all these different types of soils. And soil moisture characteristics can be done, moisture studies or can be easily done based on the thermal characteristics. Study of evapotranspiration in vegetation. Vegetation, the evapotranspiration characteristics can be identified based on the thermal different thermal characteristics, which is having more evapotranspiration, which and when there is less evapotranspiration, when there is more evapotranspiration, daytime and nighttime imaging will show different characteristics, and which type of vegetation is having more evapotranspiration. Different types of vegetations can be identified based on evapotranspiration characteristics. And detection of heat loss from the buildings, especially in the cold countries, they use the heating mechanism inside as we are using air conditioning cooling mechanisms in our region. So heat leakages are more electricity utility will be high when there is a leakage in heat. So identifying such things can be done through thermal remote sensing, and also these pipelines which carry steam and other things. If there is a leak, it can be identified, and steam pipelines can be mapped, damages can be assessed, and the detection of subsurface fires in the coal mines and all other things where there is fire in between the thermal emissions can be categorized, and even forest fires can be mapped, and a lot of applications in all the areas, and we have shown quite a few alone here. And advantages of thermal scanning is it's a relatively longer wavelengths are used, and the atmospheric scattering is minimal. The scattering will be more in the shorter wavelengths. So since it's in the far end of the infrared itself, so comparatively it has got a longer wavelength, and the scattering is minimal. And since the reflected solar radiation is not measured, it can be done both day and night. Its advantages these are the two basic advantages, since the scattering is less because that we are using the comparatively longer wavelengths, and it can be done in day and night, since we are not using the reflected energy of the solar radiation. And that's a good advantage, because at any time you can use the mapping, you can use the sensing. And some limitations are there, since larger IFO with instantaneous field of vision are generally used to ensure enough energy reaches the detector. Since it's not the EMR reflection, the radiation or the emission from the body, the energy is not that high, so we need to look into large IFOVs where to get into the enough quantity of energy that reaches the sensor. So that causes a coarse spectral resolution, spatial resolution, sorry, a coarse spatial resolution. Since we need to have large IFOVs, our spatial resolution will be less. So a coarse spatial resolution is its limitation. We need to go, if we want to have high spatial resolution, or the if you want to increase the spatial resolution, you may not be getting enough energy in the sensors. So next we'll go towards the hyperspectral sensors, where the hyperspectral remote sensing is, it's a branch again where we will be dealing with very narrow bands, hundreds of bands, to identify different types of objects. And the hyperspectral remote sensing, as we have told many times, acquire images in several narrow contiguous spectral bands, and that contiguous is an important term there. We need to look into the multispectral area. We have got distinct bands which is not contiguous. In the case of hyperspectral sensors, we will be using contiguous bands. There will not be any gap between the bands, which helps us to plot it in a continuous curve. So we need to stress that word contiguous, and you can see we can acquire images in several narrow contiguous spectral bands in the visible, near infrared, middle infrared and thermal infrared regions of the electromagnetic radiation spectrum. Typically more than 100 bands are recorded. Hundreds of bands are being recorded. A very narrow bands will be there, enables the construction of a continuous reflectance spectrum of each pixel. That's what I've told. We will be able to construct a continuous spectrum for a single pixel. All individual pixels will have hundreds of band informations. So each band will have its own characteristic, and all these bands we can plot into a spectral curve. And hyperspectral sensors are also known as imaging spectrometers. It's also known as imaging spectrometers. And we can see some examples. It can be also a long track and a cross track, as we told earlier. It can have push broom and whisk broom type of scanners. And we have Hyperion sensor and Everest sensor. The Hyperion sensor has got 220 bands from 400 nanometer to 2.5 micrometer, and Everest, which is the airborne visible and infrared imaging spectrometer, airborne visible and infrared imaging spectrometer sensor, has got 224 individual charge coupled devices in the 10 nanometer spectral resolution, or each will be having a 10 nanometer width. So total will be 2240 nanometer width in the case of Everest. So we will be having, as shown in the figure, we will be for each location we can have spectral curves like this, and we will be able to identify individual minerals, calcite, muscovite, alunite and kyanite. So such kind of within the rock characteristic composition of the rock and individual mineral identification, mineral mapping can be done with the help of hyperspectral. Because of these spectral curves we can generate, and we can match it with the existing library for that mineral. Individual minerals, we have got spectral libraries, and the spectral curves, standard spectral curves are available in the library, and the curves that we receive, if we can match and fit, we can identify the minerals in the case of hyperspectral remote sensing. So This curve matching technique can be utilized in the hyperspectral remote sensing, and we will be able to identify objects, minerals, different types of rock, different type of vegetation, different type of vegetation characteristics. All these things can be identified because a lot of application, since we use very narrow bands, very subtle differences, subtle characteristic changes can be analyzed and identified with the help of hyperspectral image, hyperspectral technology, hyperspectral remote sensing methods. And image interpretation, as I've told, we can develop curves of the pixels, and it will be compared with the library to identify the target object. All pixels whose spectra match the target spectrum to a specified level of confidence are marked as potential targets. And depending on whether the pixel is a pure feature class or a composition of more than one feature class, the resulting plot will be either a definitive curve of pure feature or a composite curve containing contribution from several features present. So if we draw a spectral curve, it can be based on its resolution, spatial resolution. The reflection can be from a single object or from multiple objects. So if it is from a single object, it can be a pure curve, pure feature, a definitive curve. And if it is from various objects, it can be a composite curve, and composite curve containing contributions from different objects. So we need to identify the pure curves to identify the exact object, and composite curves will be a combination of reflectance from different objects. You can see some example of agriculture here, where we will be able to identify different agricultural crops based on the curve matching. Individual crop will have different spectral reflectance curve as shown in the right side of the right side image, and you can match it with the spectral library and can identify what is the type of vegetation at a particular location. So different location have got different colors, and each color is a different type of vegetation which is mapped based on this spectral this curve matching technique. And this curve is matched with the library curve, and it is the particular type of vegetation or agriculture is identified. So in the some of the applications of hyperspectral image, there is a lot of applications that's coming up, and more and more researches are ongoing in this hyperspectral segment of that imaging. And you can see that mining is a heavy area where different types of minerals can be identified. A lot of mining activities will be based on the images, hyperspectral images, and different characteristics of the minerals and all rocks and all other things can be identified with the help of hyperspectral images. Geologically, as we have told earlier, rock types can be identified, structures of the rocks can be identified, groundwater aspects can be identified, different weathering processes can be identified. A lot of application areas are there. In the forestry, different types of trees can be identified, different species identification, a lot of applications in the forestry segment, forest degradation, and this species biomass calculation, all these aspects in the forestry segment. Agriculture, we have just seen an image to differentiate mapping of agriculture, the mapping of different stages of vegetation, and the forecasting of produce and also be done with the help of hyperspectral imaging. And the environmental management aspects like climate change impact on the vegetation can be analyzed. There are different disaster aspects can be mapped, and floods and all other things in the disaster segment. and applications are limitless since we have got more and more techniques coming up to identify various aspects of environmental management, agriculture, forestry, geology, and mining, and more segments of the uh, uh, natural resources can be utilized with the help of hyperspectral remote sensing. So we'll be finishing the session here, and I'll be dealing with the remote sensing satellites features in the next session. Thank you.